My grandmother has been dead these last 2 years. May God keep her soul, or at least whatever part of her didn't linger. She was, by all definitions, a superstitious woman. Not whimsical superstition either, like clovers or salt tosses, but rooted deep in something older than scripture, older than churches. Her blood was a dense blend of Scottish border magic and Lutheran guilt, producing in her a daily war between atonement and ritual, God and ghost. She believed in omens, in warnings, in things left unfinished coming back with teeth. As a child, I learned her rules. Don't sleep with your feet uncovered, or the hungry woman would pull you into the wall. Don't pick up a lantern from the ground unless you know who dropped it. And if you hear knocking from under the floor, never answer back. It means she's close. My father didn't believe in any of it. He was a modern man in every sense. Logical, practical, skeptical to the point of dismissive. But he never mocked my grandmother. Not once. He'd move her horseshoe charm back when it tilted and take his tea from the old cracked mug she swore kept away headaches. Sometimes I think it was more fear than politeness. Even he couldn't explain why the pantry would fill with mildew if her prayer rock went missing from the sill. She lived in a squat stone cottage at the edge of the old bog, a place where the ground gurgled if you stepped wrong, and lights danced where no lights should be. That cottage is mine now, and for the past few weeks, something has been trying to crawl into it. I moved in late last summer. The inheritance wasn't sudden. Gran had been dying for years in the slow, cruel way that disease takes the proud. But even on her worst days, she remembered her stories, especially the one about the lantern keeper. That was the one I hated most as a child. According to her, the lantern keeper was no man, though he wore the shape of one. His skin glowed faintly with the light of the bog, the will-o'-the-wisps, she'd say. His fingers were black and too many. His head tilted at unnatural angles, like it hadn't been fastened right. But worst of all, he knocked. From under your bed, under the floorboards, under the crawl space. Knocked and waited. And if you were foolish enough to knock back, even once, you'd invited him. But that wasn't the part that frightened me. It was her voice when she told it. The way she'd go quiet, serious. Like this one, this story, wasn't for fun. I told myself I didn't believe in such things. I told myself stories were just stories. Then, in the second week of October, the knocking started. At first, I thought it was the plumbing. The cottage had old pipes that grunted and whined like a dying man's chest. But this sound wasn't internal. It didn't clink or echo. It thudded, softly, repetitively, from beneath the floor. I'd be sitting in the living room, fire low, when I'd hear it. 3 knocks. Always 3, as though someone were pressing their knuckles to the planks just under my feet. The first night, I froze. The second night, I blamed an animal, a badger or stoat burrowing close. By the third night, I started watching the floor when the sound came. Then I began to dream of the knocking, of soft tap-tap-taps on my ribs, my spine, the soles of my feet. By the 4th night, the knocking followed me, not in my mind, in the walls, in the floorboards beside my bed. I stopped sleeping. I stopped cooking. I spent hours online reading forums about house settling, checking diagrams of piping systems, even calling a pest control expert. He found nothing, No rats, no badgers, no signs of digging or clawing. "Place is clean as a whistle," he'd said, grinning. "Maybe it's the bog messing with acoustics. Sound bounces strange out here." That night, the knocking moved to the hallway outside my bedroom. Louder, and then the dreams returned. Not dreams exactly, more like impressions. A tall figure at the edge of my bed, gently holding a lantern the color of wet bone, watching me without eyes, mouth slightly open, whispering words I couldn't remember on waking. I found myself saying Gran's old protections under my breath, the ones I hadn't thought of in years. Salt for the skin, ash for the bone, whisper no name when you're walking alone. By the time I realized what was happening, I'd already stepped too far into it. The knocking was following me. Into town, into the shop. One day, while buying candles, the old woman behind the till leaned in and said, "Don't answer it, pet," no matter how polite it sounds. I hadn't said a word to her about it. That's when I remembered the lantern. The last day Gran had been lucid, she made me promise never to pick up a dropped lantern. I thought it was a metaphor, something about burdens not meant for us. But on the 5th night, I found one, standing on the edge of the bog. It hadn't been there before. It wasn't electric or gas. It looked hand-blown, like something made by human breath. Foggy glass. Inside, something moved, slowly like a fish trapped in oil. I didn't touch it, not at first, but the knocking grew more persistent. It followed me even into dreams, and then past them, into waking moments when the fire was burning, and I knew I was alert. It wanted in. It wanted me to remember. And I did. Eventually, I remembered the summer I was 13. Gran had sent me away for a few days while she handled things. She said a fox had gotten into the henhouse, and I didn't need to see the mess. I went to my aunt's. When I came back, something in the house had changed. Gran didn't smile as much. The floor in the hallway was newly nailed down, and she'd begun placing salt lines around the fireplace. I asked her what happened. She said only, "Some things shouldn't be answered, even when they cry like children." That memory had been buried deep, and when it came back, it came with more. I remembered the boy. He'd been no older than me. I'd seen him twice, once in the field, watching the cows, once in the bog. We'd spoken, only briefly. He said his name was Asa, said his father drank, said he sometimes went walking at night to get away from the noise. Then he was gone. Missing, they said. People looked. Gran gave them tea and nods and said little, but she started locking the door at sundown, which she hadn't done before. That was the same summer I first heard the knocking. Just once, at the window. The lantern appeared the day after I remembered Asa. I didn't touch it, not yet, but I dreamed of it. And in the dream, the thing holding it looked at me and said, "You let me fall." I woke choking. The next day, I pulled up the boards in the hallway. There was no body, but there were bones, small ones, a scapula, a clump of hair still caught in amber sap. I didn't remember burying anything. I didn't think I had. But I'd seen something I shouldn't have. And Gran, she'd done what needed doing. Only now she was gone, and I had inherited more than the cottage. The knocking grew frantic that night, everywhere, ceiling, Walls under my bed. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. At midnight, it stopped. The air tasted of sulfur and old teeth. And then I heard it. A voice like wind through a cracked door. Come carry the lantern. I lasted 2 more days. On the 3rd, I gave in. I stepped out into the bog at dusk. The lantern was there, where it always was. I picked it up. It was warm. Inside, something pressed against the glass, something shaped like a hand, a child's hand. And then I knew. It wasn't me he wanted, it was Gran. But she was gone, and someone had to carry the guilt. When I turned to go back inside, I saw them, shapes in the bog water. 1, 2, 4, dozens, all holding lanterns, and I understood what Gran had done. Every time the keeper came, he left a lantern for the one who let it happen. A mark, a memory, a curse. Gran had buried more than bones. Now it was my turn to carry the light. So I did. For now. But if I ever forget again, if I ever try to bury it deeper, the knocking will start again. And next time, I don't think he'll wait for me to answer. This is the first time I've ever told this story out loud. Not because I'm afraid of being believed or not believed. God knows that's the least of my worries. But because even now, years later, I can still feel the cold rot of that place clinging to my skin. It's been long enough. I need to let it out. Maybe if I speak it, it'll lose some of its power. It started, as these things often do, with a dare. It was Jamie's idea. She had that reckless streak, that hunger for attention that usually gets people killed in movies, but somehow passes for quirky in university social circles. We were a few months into our 2nd year, staying in a half-decrepit student house on the edge of town, near the old hatchery. Yes, that hatchery. If you're from around here, you'll know the stories. The ones they tell during power outages, or when the fog rolls in too fast. The ones you half laugh about but never quite forget. A group of us had just come back from the pub. We'd been drinking too much of the cheap stuff, sat cross-legged on beanbags and slumped over broken furniture, talking ghost stories in the flicker of Jamie's ridiculous wax melter candles. At some point, the conversation turned to the hatchery, the derelict research facility at the edge of the lake, where they used to breed fish. Or something like fish. Everyone in the room had a different theory. Genetic experiments, biological weapons, a secret government lab disguised as a wildlife center. It was Connor who said, "Well, if you're all so curious, why don't one of you spend the night there?" Jamie's eyes lit up like a child's. "I'll do it," she said. "Hell, I'll live stream it." I rolled my eyes. "You're drunk." "Exactly," she said, grinning. "Perfect time for bravery." There was a pause. Then, like she always did, she turned to me. "Lena will come with me, right?" And like I always did, I said yes. Let me give you some context. The hatchery sits on the edge of Griever's Lake. It's not marked on Google Maps. Someone keeps scrubbing it. But locals know it. It's a long, low building of cracked concrete and moss-eaten brick with slatted windows and rusted gutters like torn metal veins. It's been abandoned for 20 years, give or take. The story goes something like this. In 2003, all research was halted after a sudden contamination incident. No real details were ever released. One day there were workers, security, scientists. The next day, nothing. The lake was fenced off, the roads redirected, and the hatchery was left to rot. But of course, people talked about the creature that escaped, about the bodies they pulled from the lake, white and bloated and glassy-eyed, about the strange bones found by hikers, too long, too many joints. And then there was her, the girl in the tank. That was the story that always stuck with me. According to the legend, one of the researchers, Dr. Mercier, had gone too far. They weren't just breeding fish. They were breeding something smarter, a hybrid. And he'd raised one to maturity. A girl shaped like us, but not quite. She lived in the tank at the far end of the hatchery. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She just watched. Until one day, the glass was broken from the inside. Jamie and I packed our things the next night. Torch, sleeping bag, candles. Her phone for streaming, mine for emergencies. We told the others we'd be back by morning. Unless the fish girl gets us, Jamie laughed. We got there just after dusk. The lake was black and still, like a vast dead eye. The hatchery loomed behind a sagging wire fence, its walls pocked and crusted with moss. The main door was ajar. It smelled like metal and mold and stagnant water. Charming, Jamie muttered as we stepped inside. Inside was worse. The floor was slick with algae and old scales. The ceiling creaked ominously above our heads, and the walls were lined with drained tanks, rows and rows of them, like hospital beds for the unhuman. Broken equipment lay scattered, and the air felt heavy, oppressive, like we weren't supposed to be there. Jamie was filming already. She narrated in a faux British accent, pretending to be a paranormal vlogger. Here we are at the haunted hatchery. Will we survive the night or be devoured by genetically modified sea demons? Stay tuned. I tried to laugh, but it didn't come out right. We found a mostly dry corner near the main tank room and set up camp. Jamie lit a few candles. The flame flickered against the black glass of the largest tank, which towered at the far end of the room. Thick glass walls, stained green, like something had lived there for a very long time. We talked, we joked, we waited. Around midnight, the temperature dropped. Not gradually, suddenly, like stepping into a freezer. Our breath plumed in the air. My skin prickled. Jamie's phone froze midstream, and then we heard it. A soft tapping sound from inside the tank. Jamie laughed nervously. "Wind," she said. But there was no wind. The air was perfectly still. The water in the tanks didn't ripple. Then we heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. A pause. Then something like a long, dragging motion across the glass, like fingers, wet, cold fingers. We froze. There was something inside the tank. I lifted my torch, hand trembling. The beam landed on the glass, and for a moment, I saw her. Just a glimpse, a pale face pressed against the inside, eyes too wide, no whites. Just solid, oily black. Her mouth was open, as if she was screaming silently. Her fingers were splayed on the glass. Then she was gone. Jamie screamed. We grabbed our bags, fumbled for the door, but it wouldn't open. It should have opened. It had been wide open before. Now it was sealed tight, as if welded shut. We tried the windows, boarded, the vents, barred, and then came the sound. Splash. From the far tank, followed by soft, slithering footsteps. I turned slowly. The tank was open. Water had spilled across the floor, slick and dark. Something was crawling across the wet concrete, something humanoid, but not human. Elongated limbs, slick, mottled skin, black eyes that didn't reflect the torchlight. Jamie backed up. No, no, no. The thing moved fast. There was a blur, a flash of something too many-jointed, and then Jamie was screaming, not in fear, but in pain. It had grabbed her by the leg. She slipped and cracked her head on the concrete. I tried to pull her back, but the thing was strong. So strong. I felt it yank her, hard, and she slid toward the tank, fingernails clawing uselessly at the ground. "Help me," she screamed. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I just watched as it pulled her back into the tank, inch by inch. Her screams turned to gurgles, then to silence. The water stilled, and the thing looked at me, just for a moment, then vanished beneath the surface. They found me the next morning, curled in the hallway, soaking wet and covered in blood. I don't remember getting out. Maybe I ran, maybe I crawled, maybe it let me go. They searched the hatchery, of course, found no body, no blood, no tank. It had been empty for years, they said, dry, abandoned. They accused me of making it up, of hurting Jamie, of lying. I was suspended for a semester, pending investigation, but eventually the charges were dropped. No evidence, no Jamie. Just another girl who ran away. But I know what I saw. I know what took her. And I know why it didn't take me. I've been walking the shoreline of Griever's Lake every week since then. Not because I want to, because something calls me. At night, I dream of the tank. I see her face in the water. I hear her tapping against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Like she's waiting for me to come back. Like I'm unfinished business. Sometimes I hear footsteps behind me, slithering, dragging. Sometimes the mirror in my room fogs up, like someone breathed on it, even when the room is cold. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I see Jamie. But she's not screaming anymore. She's smiling, and her eyes are black, just like hers. Last October, I was walking home from my shift at a small law office on the south side of Minneapolis. It had just rained, and the streets shimmered under the amber haze of dying street lamps. I always cut through McClellan Park. It shaved 10 minutes off my commute, and frankly, I liked the quiet. That night, though, I noticed something strange near the old bandstand at the center of the park. There were 6 children standing in a half circle around what looked like a metal object. They couldn't have been older than 10 or 11. One of them held a length of rebar and was rhythmically tapping the object with it. I slowed down, both curious and vaguely concerned. Minneapolis kids aren't known for being especially rowdy, and McClellan's not a rough part of town. I've walked past teenagers vaping or tossing fireworks before, but never anything like this. As I approached, the kids didn't run or scatter. They just stared, at me, then at the object between them. I was close enough now to see what it was. A bell, or what looked like a bell. It was made of a dark, almost rust-colored metal, maybe bronze, maybe something older. Its surface was engraved with odd symbols, rows of curves and jagged lines that reminded me of Norse runes mixed with something angular and wrong. It looked ancient, not the kind of thing kids find lying around in a city park. The smallest kid, a freckled boy in a red raincoat, was holding a notebook. He spoke first. "We rang 6 times, he said, voice steady. "It won't let us leave unless someone rings the 7th. I thought it was a game. Kids playing some creepy version of Red Rover or trying to scare an adult for kicks. But the way they looked at me, completely serious, not a hint of mischief, made me hesitate. "All right," I said, trying to keep it light. "Is this some kind of Halloween dare?" The girl closest to the bell shook her head. "It called us here, from our houses. We didn't mean to come." I looked down at the bell again. It was about the size of a human skull. When I stepped closer, I felt a subtle vibration in the air, like when you stand too close to a running generator. The rebar the boy had been using lay beside it. The end was slightly bent, as if it had been hitting something harder than metal. "Where'd you find this thing?" I asked. The freckled boy held out the notebook. Inside were shaky sketches of the bell, its symbols, and what looked like maps. Hand-drawn maps of the park, marked with compass-like designs and crude clock faces. "My brother heard it first," he said. "From our basement, we followed it." "You're out here alone?" They all nodded. I stood there a moment, unsure what to do. Part of me wanted to call someone, but who? The cops? A child psychologist? The whole thing felt like a dream you forget halfway through waking up. "Do your parents know you're here?" "They'll forget," said the girl. "It makes them forget." "Okay," I said, sighing. "I'll ring your bell." The children flinched. One whispered something in a language I didn't recognize. The others started backing away. "Wait," I said. "I thought that's what you wanted." "If you ring it," said the redcoat boy, "it'll remember you." That gave me pause. But I picked up the rebar anyway. Maybe it was some art piece or cursed playground prank, but if it was going to help me get these kids home, I was willing to indulge it. I struck the bell once. The sound it made wasn't natural. It was deep and wet, like the groan of a drowning choir. It vibrated through my ribs and seemed to echo not in my ears, but in the marrow of my bones. Everything around us shifted. The trees looked taller. The park lights dimmed. I suddenly felt colder than the October air could justify. The bell shook once, then went still. All 6 children turned away at once and began to walk into the shadows between the trees. "Wait, where are you going?" None of them answered. They just disappeared between the tree trunks. I stood alone with the bell. No wind, no sound, just a faint scent of rotting leaves. I left it there. I shouldn't have. That night, I dreamed of water. I was standing in my bathtub filled to the brim. The water was black and undisturbed, but I couldn't move. I couldn't get out. And from the depths, a sound like that bell reverberated through me. I woke up in a sweat, throat sore, though I don't remember screaming. For a few days, nothing happened. I even forgot about the kids. Work dragged on, and October slipped into November. Then the calls started. The first was a static-filled voicemail, a child whispering numbers in a halting, staccato rhythm. 7 numbers. I didn't recognize the voice or the number. The second call came at 3:06 a.m. I picked it up and heard what sounded like wet footsteps across tile. No words, just steps, and something breathing heavily into the receiver. By the third night, I'd stopped answering altogether. Then the bell came back. I found it on my doorstep one morning, wrapped in old newspaper and duct tape. No note, no explanation, just the same rusted, rune-covered bell. I threw it in the trash. It was back the next day. I tried burying it. I tried tossing it in the river. Every night it returned, and the dreams got worse. I was no longer in my tub. I was somewhere darker, underground maybe, a stone room. 7 bells lined the walls, each with a name beneath it. One of them had my name scratched below in jagged lines. My bell hadn't rung yet, but the others had. I began hearing the hum in real life, the same dull vibration that once hovered near the bell in the park. It followed me, to the office, to the grocery store, even on the bus. Other passengers would glance up, frown, then forget what they were doing. The vibration settled in my chest like a second heartbeat. One night I came home to find the apartment door ajar. Inside, everything was untouched, except the bell. It sat on my kitchen table, surrounded by 6 old photos I had never seen. Each showed a different group of children in different decades, black and white, color film, even Polaroids. In each, the same bell sat in the center. I looked closer. In every photo, one child looked directly at the camera. Each of their eyes were pure black. I started researching public records, urban legends, local papers. Nothing. But on an old message board about haunted artifacts, I found a single post from 2003 titled, "The Bell That Counts to 7." The story was nearly identical. A group of kids, an old object, a park, and 1 ring too many. The author had stopped posting 2 days after their last update, which simply read, "It knows my name now." I haven't slept much since then. I keep the bell sealed in a lead box I ordered online. I stuffed it with salt and sage and old superstition. But sometimes, around 3 a.m., I still hear it. A low groan, not ringing, calling. There are days I don't remember getting to work, times when I wake up in the tub, clothes soaked. Once I woke up outside McClellan Park, with dirt under my nails and the taste of metal in my mouth. I think I rang it more than once. I think each ring was a door, and I think something stepped through. I've started hearing children's voices in my apartment, not playful, not real. They're counting again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then silence, just waiting. Because I am the 7th bell, and I can't unring myself.